I'm presented with the following situation. I'm asked to plot the following 4 points. Now, when I look at my piece of paper, there's absolutely nothing there. It's just blank paper, and I'm asked to plot these points. So the question arises, well, how do I show where these points are located? So you may think, okay, if I had some graph paper, perhaps I could put these points here somewhere on the graph paper. Well, the problem then is, okay, so where am I going to put 1, 3? Well, I could just put 1, 3 anywhere. At this point, I have no idea where 1, 3 is. So let's just take a stab at it. Let's just say 1, 3 is right there. There's nothing on this paper that tells me that that's 1, 3, except for the fact that I decide to claim that is 1, 3. So then the problem is, well, if this is 1, 3, where is 2, 4? Well, I know that if this is 1, 3, 2, most likely is over here, and 4, since this was 1, 3, this must be 2, 3, so 2, 4 must be right there. Okay, so that wasn't too bad. But what about -6, 8? Oh, that's a little bit more challenging. So let's see, this one here was 1, 3, so -6, so let me see, that means I would have to go, that would be 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, and an 8. Well, this was 1, 3 over here. So wait, oh, I just moved my pen. So now I got to figure out what that was. That was 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. So that's -6, 3. Let's see, that would be 8 would be, so that would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that point must be right there. Boy, that was a lot of work. And then I have to figure out where 0, -5 is. Well, let's see here. This was 1, 3. So let's see here. 0 must be here. And then -5 has to be down, but I have to remember this is 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, -1, 0, -2, 0, -3, 0, -4, 0, -5. Okay, so why was this so hard? If you noticed that all these points, for me to figure them out on this graph paper, I had to figure out where they were relative to the other point. I had to pick a point and say, okay, that's where I'm going to start from. And then I had to decide where was this point relative to this point. Well, the reason we don't do math like this is because we found out a way to show us where the center is. So if I'm going to say, as we would call the origin, okay, so the origin, I put that in quotes because this is just some sort of arbitrary place in space. So it's arbitrary place in space. So what do I mean by arbitrary? I mean it's just some starting point that I choose. So if I were going to tell you how to get from one place to the other, I would tell you relative to where you're standing. So that's the same thing with our XY coordinate. So something is missing that makes this much easier. And what's missing is we need an x-axis and a y-axis. Our x-axis and our y-axis tell us where things are in space. It's a relative marker. It's arbitrary. We just decide that's where it's going to be, and that's how we're going to number it. It's our choice. Since I've already put this at 1, 3, I know that my x value of 1 is here. So my x value of 0 is right next to it. So that means my x value of 0 has to go through there. Okay? So everything along that line has to be where x is 0. So that's one axis. And which axis is that? That happens to be my y-axis, isn't it? Because everywhere along here, because remember here I said this was 1, 3, so this must be 0, 3. Down here is 0, 2, 0, 1, 0, 0. Oh, how convenient. That's 0, 0 right there. So that means right there, y must be 0. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so we can see this a little clearer. Okay? So I remember I said this was my first point that I put on, which was 1, 3. So this must be 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 1, 0, 0. That means y must be 0 there, which means if I go this way, that's 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5, 0. So that means everywhere along here, my y is 0. So that must be my x-axis. So now that we have an x and a y-axis on here, let me see if I put these points on correctly. So remember I said this point was 1, 3. Well, my x is 1 and my y is 3. So that's 1, 3. Here's at 2, 4. So my x is 2 and my y is 1, 2, 3, 4. My y is 4. So that was right. Let's see if I did this one correctly. X is negative 6. So if I go over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 6, and then y has to be 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right here is telling me that y is 8. Here, x is 0 and y is negative 5. So right here, x is 0, and if I go negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 5. So simply by making this arbitrary designation of the center of space at 0, 0, I can know where these points are in space. So if you notice, my 0, 0 is not exactly in the center of the graph as it traditionally is when you're given something that's printed out. That's because I decided to put 1, 3 right here. Everything else has a relative placement. There is really no significance in the x and y axis except that it tells you where everything is in space. And that's why we have an x and a y axis. It helps us to figure out where things are.